All right, so now I think the microphone is ready. Okay, so take two. This is Melanie Brockwell with the Oneness Talking Point, episode, let me check my calendar, 17. And I don't do a lot of preparation, or what people would call preparation, for webinars. I don't write a script or have a sense of what it is that I'm going to be talking about. And it's not that I do that with everything in my life, because there are obviously places like, say, if I'm composing an exposition or writing an essay, you do a lot of research and you prepare a lot of information and you put it all together and you tell a story in a particular way. So it's not a symptom of some aspect of self that there be no preparation. There is often a lot of research and preparation that goes into what I do, just as there is a lot of design in both the layout and the composition of how things fit together for me, including in my business. And I say including in my business because for me the whole process of being alive is about inclusion. So rather than having this thing that I call business over here that I go to excuse me, with a particular mindset and a particular energy and a particular face, for me business is very much just a continuation of the rest of my existence. There's a wholeness and a oneness in the way I conduct myself, in the way I am conducted by oneness is probably a more accurate description of how it feels for me, how it makes sense to me as a oneness oracle. So rather than believing that I am this entity that operates from a fixed point that kind of spreads out into the world and can categorize those actions, reactions, and events that seem to happen to me, I have a very different picture that makes sense to me on how all that works. So I feel conducted by all that is, not as a separate entity, not as an identity that's fixed in space with a boundary that can be known. So my sense of business is tied up into that, same way that your sense of business is tied up in your cosmology. Cosmology, the wholeness of how the world makes sense to you, not cosmology, the stars in the sky. And that feels like a nice place to talk about how just before I started the show this morning, I kind of checked in with my conduction software and said, is there anything you want me to reference? And I got a picture in, my head of this book, which I haven't read yet, and opened it to a page and started reading. And I'll just read you a couple of paragraphs. It's like a page and a half, and then I'll tell you why I feel it's significant. Beginning of the page has a heading. It says The Original Face. So this book, sorry, I just remembered, this will be an MP3 for a lot of people, is called Just This Is It, Dong Chan and the Practice of Suchness. The Original Face, page 113. The original face invoked by the monk in this story is a primary image in Chan law, frequently used to express or call for fundamental truth or the true self, often via the question, What is your original face before your parents were born? This image probably first appears in a story about the celebrated Chan's sixth ancestor, Dajian Huineng, who was 5 generations before Dongchan in the lineage, and from whom all later Chan and Zen derive. The story, in short, goes that Huineng was an illiterate woodcutter and layman from the boondocks of southern China, who awakened upon hearing a line from the Diamond Sutra, a perfection of wisdom text focused on emptiness teaching. He travelled to the large monastery complex of the Chan fifth ancestor, Daman Hongren, who later secretly gave Huineng Dharma transmission to become the sixth ancestor. When he departed and headed south with the help of Hongren, some of the learned monks who had trained there for many years chased after Huineng, jealously believing he had tricked the fifth ancestor into giving him the robe and bowl insignia of the transmission. When one monk caught up with Huineng, the latter placed the robe on a rock, but this monk, a former general, was not able to lift it. Ashamed, he asked for Huineng's teaching. Huineng asked him to put aside all thoughts of good and bad, and then see his original or primal face. At least some portions of the longer narrative about Huineng are polemic hagiography and counter-verifiable history. The part of the story about the original face does not appear until later Song Dynasty editions of the Platform Sutra, which relates a version of the Huineng story and a collection of teachings attributed to him. This story of the original face also appears as Case 23 in the important 12th century Gateless Barrier Cone collection. Dongshan told the monk who inquired about the bird's path and the original face that to see the original face he must not follow the bird's path. Dongshan here implies that the original face of foundational true nature is more immediate and primal than any path or progression, even one so ephemeral as the bird's path. Apart from stages of any progressive path, this original face is beyond any conceptualization at all, not caught by the conventional human discriminating consciousness that is aware of the world in terms of objects. In the context of discussing objectless meditation, Tenshin Reb Anderson calls the original face a face that relinquishes any concept of face, so there is no way to carry any meaning about what your face is. Immersed in suchness, arising beyond conceptual mediation, and beyond mental categories, one is open to your face without any concept by which you can understand your face. While Dongshan may recommend the bird's path to his students, he also encourages them not to be caught by it or try to turn it into some program upon which to rely. Good on you, Dongshan. And that was the first page that I turned to. And for those people that know me, will know Huineng is one of my favourite entities. I didn't know really that he was a master of anything when I originally discovered some of his writings. I don't know, probably about 20 years ago. It just appeared in one of those random pieces of information that I get when I need to get them, I guess. And then intermittently, his name and his story has kind of turned up along the way for me in many different interests, many different research paths, things that I'm looking at or not looking at, and he turns up on the edges of things. I feel like his writings, or the writings that are attributed to him, reflect the kind of oneness that makes sense to me, that I don't see in a lot of the other masters. His sense of oneness isn't about the directive, the instructions of how to get to enlightenment. His sense of oneness seems to be more in line with the way it makes sense to me, which is the mystery of mastery. So in the allowing of not knowing, which means that I can't have a practice, but I can do what I'm told to do or what I feel to do in the moment, which might look like a practice. I can make the moves and, do a Tai Chi session, or, eat the food of whatever it is at the moment that feels important to eat. I'm just going to close that door because our lovely gardeners are out there. And so what does this have to do with business? If you tuned in for some sense of how to have a better business or how to make oneness work for you in business, I think that's the mirror that's being put up so that you can see what is true for you, that your sense of business and oneness are acting upon each other in what makes sense to you. If you feel like judging that, then that's up to you. I don't really have a sense of anything being right or wrong for you. I just have a sense of whatever's true for you. And so the conducting of business for me, and I'm making a grand assumption that anyone who exists in oneness is in the moment. So that doesn't mean you don't have a calendar on your desk, and it doesn't mean that you don't think about the bills that get paid every month. It just means that that those things get done in the moment. So the purchase of a calendar is the inspiration in the moment. It's not a plan that you have, that you say, these are the things that I need for financial success, because financial success is unimportant. In oneness, business is the process that somebody else has labeled of what it is that's going on for you in this moment. So it looks like a financial enterprise. It looks like you're selling your services or your products. It looks like you're conducting research. It looks like you're sending out an email campaign with an end in mind. But that's not how it works. That's not what you're being told to do. That's not what it feels like you're doing in the moment. You don't really need to correct anyone if that's what they think you're doing. They think what they think for a reason. I don't really get a sense of needing to educate anybody any differently. And you value the process of, the earning money and the provision of services, etc. But the value of it only exists because in the moment you're paying attention to what it is that you're being asked to do. And a lot of people will ask me, well, how does anything get done if you don't have this massive grand plan, to build an empire or to have a successful business or to make yourself financial or whatever it is? How can anything get done? How can you coordinate a business from that place of simply being present or simply being? I'm not sure how to answer that question except to reply that life is what life is. If it looks to you like the grand plan is important, and if it looks to you that it's necessary to have a goal of financial success, and you can name what that is. And if it looks to you like you need to separate what you call business from anything else that's occurring in your life, then that's how it makes sense to you. You know, there's no challenge in any of that. All I can say is that the thing called business, for me, in oneness, is just what I'm doing every day. I get very clear instructions on what to write, what to research, how to be in business without being in business. So I don't really need to have a separate part of my consciousness, or a separate part of my energy, or a separate part of my awareness that's committed to those things. I'm only ever following my instructions. I'm not sure how else to put that. I know that that's not going to make sense to a lot of people, but I'm only ever present to this moment. So for me, the sense of intuition, there's no meta, awareness. I don't consider the instructions I get as separate from the banal, everyday hunger, so you eat, tired, so you sleep. For me, all of those things are part of my instructions. I don't have a special slot and consider the spiritual something that's over here with, lights and flashes and angel song. For me, everything is angel song. For me, everything is instruction. For me, everything is a cosmic conversation. I can't draw a line and say this thing is not as important, or this thing is human and this thing is not. The concept of human for me is a cultural idea. I guess having studied cosmologies, the way that we come to believe and label and navigate our existence, the way we come to individuate our reality, is designed by a culture, is designed by a cosmology, and there are cosmologies that don't abide by those senses of being. So I'm very aware of the fact that there are no facts, the fact that the things that we believe are embedded within a cosmology. So I don't need to identify some things as special and other things as everyday. That's a very particular cosmology that does that. It's probably the one that most people who are watching this video are more familiar with, and they've never ever thought to question it. They always thought that that's the facts of life, that's the way it works. You have physics and metaphysics, and never the twain shall meet, or perhaps they will at some point, and that's the thing you're going for. For me, there's only physics. And I guess having studied the history of physics and the history of medicine, not just in this line, of Europe and Greece, where we divide and label things as East and West, divisions that don't actually exist, divisions that were created from a particular cultural perspective. That awareness allows me also to understand that my cosmology is of oneness, which includes sense of self, flesh and not flesh, animated and not animated, I can understand that all those things exist for people in a particular dualistic cosmology in the lineage of that, very Greek history. But for some reason, from a very young age, I was already aware of some other way of being in the world. It's not an intellectual enterprise that one enacts. It's the cosmology that's informing your experience. So even though I say the cosmology that most people who are watching this video will be of that Greek lineage, you are embedded in it. It's the thing that is true for you. Because if it wasn't, you would already be acting as if something else was true for you. So I'm not saying it's being imposed upon you and whatever, you need to get out of it or whatever. I don't ever think that about the way people navigate. What I'm saying is, it's not an artificial thing. It's a cultural design that's already true for you. So otherwise it wouldn't be, and you would operate in a different way, and you wouldn't look at the world and see the separation that you see. You wouldn't look at the world and think business is about money and you have to pay your bills and that's a necessity and it's an obligation of the world that we live in, and it's horrible sometimes, and it gives me a chance to figure out what I want to do with my life, and spirituality's over here and it's a very separate thing, and it's gentle and loving and warm and helpful, and it's how I nourish myself so I can go back into the battle of making money, and at some point that circle will meet and the world will be fabulous and we won't have to think about the struggle of success or whatever. That story's true for you because you're already living it. That's the way you're experiencing the world, in separation. If that's the way you're experiencing the world, in separation, then that's the way you're experiencing it. There's no judgment on that. There's no sense that being aware of it will allow you to change it because you need to be doing something else. I don't really have a sense of what it is that you need to be doing. That's really up to you. There's no imposition of ideal, and I think that's what is it the original face, the original, see, and I instantly turn to that page again. The original face tells me, reminds me about what is true for me. In the oneness of not knowing, the truth is constantly being revealed. So I might be asked to write a business plan, and I can do that. But I'm only invested in the moment of writing that business plan. Unless in the next moment I'm also being asked to take the next step, to do something else that looks like it's connected to the plan that I've made. At no time am I actually creating a concreteness that I'm attached to that says the business plan is going this way and I'm on this path and I'm taking all the steps that I need to along a journey to a point where I will have finished the plan, or I will have succeeded in my goals, or I will have attained financial success. For me, none of those things are important. I write the plan when I'm asked to write the plan. I take the steps when I'm asked to take the steps. I read the emails when I'm asked to read the emails. I open the book to the page I'm asked to open the book. I am conducted by the universe. And if it needs, money to go in this direction or that direction, or even when I write those online experiences, I just say, I don't even have to say, before I've even had the thought, the number appears in my head. How much to charge for this? There's a number that just pops in there. I don't have a sense of, right, it's 8 weeks, every day, which, you know, could pretty much turn into 8 months because every day is so dense it could be its own course, you know. And then there's all these extra things that go in there, videos and sessions and MP3s and journals, etc., etc. So I need to work out logically how much all that is worth. Or it took me this long to write it all. If I was getting paid, I don't know, $35 an hour, how much would that be? And if I needed this many people a year in order to, like, it just doesn't work like that. It could. I mean, the universe could say, this is what you need to do. You need to sit down and you need to work all that out to come up with the number. If that's what it asked me to do, then that's what I would do. And so I guess the question is, how do I know that it's the universe that's asking? And why do you call it the universe? And what's the difference between that and the way that business is normally conducted? How do I know it's the universe? I don't have any other voice. The Chariot of Shekinah is one way to reference what it is that I'm talking about when I say I have no other voice. I don't seem to have a will that wants to do things in a particular way. In the art of allowing, and I say it's an art because it's not a craft, it's not something that I practice and learnt to do, it was something that I was born with, for want of a better word, that I may not have tomorrow. This openness to what it is I'm meant to do now, this interest in what's going on and how to understand it rather than to be understood. This sense of what is it I'm being asked to do here has just always been with me. It's the way I am, which has many labels. Human angel is one of them, Diva Avatar in its original text. There's no sense that that's an ideal that I am recommending. And there's also no sense that I'm fixed to those titles or those definitions. I'm just using that as an example to explain what I mean when I say the universe is the only voice that I hear. And at the same time, there's no sense of separate consciousness for me that I have control over. So in any moment, I feel like a gossamer formlessness that gets filled with the experiences that it needs to have in that moment. At some points, that would be something that people call empathy. At other points, that would be something that people call channeling. At other points, that would be something that people call past life memory. At other points, that would be something that people would call possession. At some points, that would be something that people call something else, shamanism. For me, none of these things are any different to being conducted by the universe in any other moment. So all of the labels that people have put on those experiences, so there's those ones where it's the gossamer formlessness and you just get filled with this experience that has no connection to any of the things that have gone on in what you call your life. And then at other times, it's instructions, I guess pictures or words without words, messages without words there's a sense of knowing. I'm just trying to think of a way to describe it. I guess, like, so say you go to a forest and there's a beautiful tree and you take a deep breath. How do you know to take a deep breath? It's not an instruction like you have to, or in this moment you need to. It's a beautiful invitation. You're in the forest and there's a beautiful tree and you take a deep breath. That's what my instructions are like. The wind blows and there's cold against your skin. That's what my instructions are like. So they come in many different forms because they are my entire existence. There's no sense that the instructions I'm receiving are any different to the things that other people have labeled instinct, I don't know, biological need, emotional reaction. For me, none of those things are boxes. They are all part of that sacred conversation where I am being conducted by the universe. And many times, the things that other people would call traumatic, for me, are quite intense, but beautiful, sacred, equally valuable experiences in my life. There's really no sense for me of success and failure. Everything that fills me I guess it's hard because we're so used to using words like the things that I feel versus the things that I see versus the things that I do versus the things that are done to me. None of those verbs, like none of the noun kind of doing words or the noun naming words or the verb doing words make sense explaining the kind of experience that I have in a oneness cosmology. So how do I know it's the universe? Because it's the only experience I have. I'm trying to remember what the second question was. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe at this point it's more important for you to ask yourself how it makes sense to you. You know, what is the business of living for you? You know, the business of living for me is being conducted by the universe. We call it being present or simply being. But I don't have any other choice. That's the way that I am. I can't make it any other way, nor would I want to. You know, part of being conducted by the universe is absolute surrender. And the joy of that, the love of that. You know, it's not an allowing in resistance. It's not going, I am this way and I have no other choice, and if only it wasn't so. I don't have any sense of terrible obligation. But again, I still have those feelings. That gossamer formlessness allows, brings in this whole experience, and I can have a sense of terrible obligation, or I can have an experience of shame. I can have suicidal feelings, or I can have the tiredness and heaviness of just not knowing if I can keep doing this tomorrow. And that's what I mean when I say other people would call that empathy or channeling. Other people would call that the taking on of somebody else's stuff. But it doesn't make sense to me like that. It doesn't feel like something else. And I trust that all of the experiences that I'm having are being conducted by the universe. So when that feeling of shame comes in, for example, it might say, without words, pick up a pen, get a notebook. And you have no sense of why, what connection this has to the experience of shame that you're having. And then you start writing. And the words aren't in your head. The words, it's like your hand writes them and then they're being spoken to you in your imagination, or whatever you want to call it. The narrator. It's not the other way around. I guess it kind of reminds me of that whole quantum wormhole thing where that, we have a sense of linear time, before, now, after. I don't have that sense, before, now, after. A lot of the things that occur for me have that all mixed up. And I guess that's why it's easier for me to let go of that sense of linear cause and effect and live in an acausal universe. It's naturally my cosmology. So what's naturally your cosmology? Because this isn't about comparison. This isn't about teaching you a better way. What comes up for you when we have this conversation? Did you want it to be about how to have a better business? What questions or topics did you want to cover? How does it feel not to have them covered? Is this your invitation to cover those questions and topics? Who do you feel is better suited to answer your questions? How does it feel to realize that you want questions answered? What would happen if the universe turned around to you and said, nobody can answer your questions except you? What is the answer? And then ask the questions and ask for the information that you're looking for. Where does it take you when I say all those things at once? All right, I'm going to leave it there. See if I can figure out how to turn it off properly. All right, people. You know I love you. I'm going to stop streaming. And I will talk to you soon. Just send in your questions. I think what I might do eventually is just open up the end of it to questions. Because you can always post them in the Webinar X section. Now that we're not doing the Hangouts anymore. Or what I would really love to do is just have a hangout after the show. It can be immediately after, or maybe tonight if that suits your time zone a bit better. Tomorrow morning, whatever, you know how flexible I am. About whatever questions or things that came up for you that you really feel like you need to say out loud. Because often saying them out loud, I don't know, it just does this magic thing. Who cares if we can't define what that magic is? Just feels necessary, That's your instructions to say it out loud. You don't need to justify it. Let's just do that. All right, lots of love, and I